The long-awaited moment is here. Special counsel Robert Mueller has delivered his final report to the Department of Justice. As of now, we don't know what's in it. It hasn't been made public. Mueller and his team of prosecutors have been investigating Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and any potential links to the Trump campaign. Here with me now in our studio, our Capitol Hill and our White House correspondents, Lisa Desjardins and Yamiche Alcindor. Robert Costa of the Washington Post and host of Washington Week, and Carrie Johnson. She is the Justice Reporter correspondent for NPR. Hello to all of you. Carrie, I want to start with you since you cover the Justice Department. We know the Attorney General said today they've gotten the report. He said he's going to begin to review it, and yet the word came almost immediately from Justice officials that there weren't going to be any indictments. How do we read that?
No new major indictments coming. The bottom line here is that Mueller's investigation has ended. He is closing up shop in the weeks to come. Several of the prosecutors who have worked for him are going to go on to do other things. And we know that in the next several days, the Attorney General Bill Barr and the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, along with Mueller, are going to decide how much of his report to make public.
Well, they said they're going to review it, meaning they're going to read it, they're going to share it with a number of attorneys at the Justice Department, we assume.
Yeah, right now it appears a very small number of people have actually seen this report, which has been described to me as comprehensive. We don't know how long it is. We do know the Attorney General expects to tell Congress, perhaps as early as this weekend, the top line conclusions from the special counsel. That underlying evidence, other facts may take a lot longer to emerge.
And I want to turn to Lisa Desjardins at that point, because they did say, the Attorney General did say, turning it over to Congress, right, or at least providing what he called principal conclusions to the Congress. That doesn't say he's going to share everything with Congress. So what does that Congress expect?
No, let's take a look at the single sheet of paper that we have right now that tells us what we know. This is the letter that, as you say, Attorney General Barr sent to the four key members, the leaders, Republican and Democrat, of the Judiciary Committees. Let's take this excerpt from it. He writes, "I may be in a position to advise you of the special counsel's principal conclusions as soon as this weekend." It's interesting, there's also another very standout paragraph in this, in which the Attorney General writes that as part of the provisions of the special counsel statute, it requires that I provide you with instances, if any, in which a proposed action by a special counsel was so inappropriate or unwarranted that it should not be pursued. And he writes, Attorney General Barr, there were no such instances during the special counsel's investigation. That's very notable, because that says that the Justice Department is on one page at this time. Now, it doesn't indicate what's in the report, but it does mean that there may be less divide than potentially was there.
But sending some signals. So, Yamiche, the White House, when does the White House get to either see this entire report or get some sort of briefing on it?
It's unclear when the White House will get it. It will likely be sometime around when Congress gets it. I've been emailing with the president and texting with the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. There were some reports early on that they were demanding to see it before Barr would review it. And Rudy Giuliani tells me tonight that's not true. They're happy to wait until William Barr has reviewed it and then to see it and look at it along with Congress, and when that's going to be ready for that. I think it's also important to note that the White House hasn't reacted yet. Everyone's watching President Trump's Twitter feed at this point to see whether or not he's going to say something. The White House has called a lid, which in layman's terms means that we're not going to see the president tonight. They did that around 6:30 p.m. So what we have now is really just a tweet from Sarah Sanders. So we have a single tweet from the White House. She's, of course, the White House press secretary. I want to read that tweet because it is all we have from the White House right now. She says, the next steps are up to the Attorney General Barr, and we look forward to the process taking its course. The White House has not received or been briefed on the special counsel's report. That said, even though the White House has not seen anything, there are people in Trump world and people close to President Trump who are already saying this is vindication, the fact that there's no further indictments that are going to be had. They say that this is essentially proving that the president is saying this was a witch hunt and that this had nothing to do with the president or collusion and that his campaign is fully vindicated. That's too early to say, per se, because no one's seen the report, but that's what they're saying.
And Robert Costa, I mean, you talk to people who are around the president all the time, people around all across this city. How much does it matter how this report is interpreted in the early days?
It's going to depend on what the Attorney General decides to release, and it certainly is in his hands at this moment. But the real fight goes to Capitol Hill. Regardless of what the Attorney General decides, House Democrats are already saying, including Speaker Pelosi, we want this report to be made public. So the Attorney General may say we want to leave this aside, put that on a shelf because it's too sensitive, some of this background information that may be in the report. But you can expect maybe Mr. Mueller, the Attorney General, to be called to the Congress to testify before House Democrats and say, what do you really know? Why won't you release more if they don't release more?
So expecting a fight, a big fight.
A political war.
Over what is released and what isn't.
This is the reckoning for the Department of Justice, for the Trump presidency. More than 2 years into the Trump presidency, we've been waiting for this moment. It's going to hinge on how leaders respond in both parties at this pivot point.
And Carrie Johnson, the Justice Department is supposed to be independent in all of this, and yet this is an Attorney General who was appointed by President Trump. How does the Justice Department play this going forward?
You know, Bill Barr is an interesting character. He's only, I think, the second person to have served as U.S. Attorney General twice. Bill Barr was the Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, and he basically told senators in his confirmation hearing this time around that he's a 68-year-old guy, and he doesn't need this job, really, so he has the independence and the DOJ tradition to step back or draw a line in the sand if he believes there's some interference of some sort. There's no evidence so far the White House has interfered at all with Barr, and I think he'd be the kind of guy to speak up and push back if that actually happened.
And that's what we'll be watching for. Lisa, how much push is there going to be on the part of Democrats? Robert mentioned that many of them are prepared to go to the mat.
The first emails I got in my inbox were from Democrats tonight. No doubt they had those ready, and they know that their call is not just, as Robert's talking about, to ask for full release of the report, but it's notable, Judy, they want all the supporting documents. Because whatever Mueller concludes, now there will be a question in Congress, is there anything in here that's impeachable at all? You know, we don't know how the president plays out in this report, but that is the question Democrats want to answer next. And briefly, I do want to review, though, we talked so much about the president. This report was about Russian collusion, so I want to look at quickly some statistics that we have about what Mueller has done up to this point. This investigation has had 34 individuals who were indicted. Of those, 6 of them were Trump associates, only 6. The vast majority were Russian nationals involved in some form of hacking. Now, it's interesting, this investigation actually began in 2016 with an FBI investigation, and then it was handed over to Mueller in 2017. So we're about a year and a half into Mueller's investigation, a little bit more, and now we see the end of it.
Yamiche, who at the White House is going to be in charge of examining this and going over? We know the president has been intimately involved. He's been calling this a witch hunt virtually from, well, soon after it began when he realized he was under the microscope here. But who's going to be running the show for this?
Well, I think if we ask who's going to be running the show, that would be President Trump. If we ask who's going to be reviewing it for legal expertise, that's going to be the White House counsel's office. But I also think that the president's personal lawyers, including Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow, they're going to also be looking at this report. And the important thing here is how the president's going to see this report as a political tool. He's going to be wanting to look at this report and spin it to say, I am completely vindicated. This is evidence of this witch hunt. There was talk at the beginning of this, before we know that the report was turned over. There was a report that the president might even have an alternate report if he didn't like what he saw. In this case, it looks like the president's not going to do that. And I've been talking to Corey Lewandowski, who was a former campaign manager for President Trump in 2016. He said this, any indictment that Bob Mueller has been involved in has nothing to do with Donald Trump or the campaign. I think this was a $40 million, 2+ year witch hunt against the president because Hillary Clinton could not resolve with the fact that she had lost the election. So that's the president's camp. Really quickly, I'll put up a quick graphic of the people that are associated with President Trump that have been charged. There's a long list. Michael Cohen, who is his personal lawyer, George Papadopoulos, former campaign advisor, Roger Stone, long friend and advisor, Paul Manafort, former campaign chairman, Rick Gates, former campaign advisor, Michael Flynn, former national security advisor. Now, all of those men are charged with lying in some way, either to Congress or to the FBI. Paul Manafort is the only one who's also charged with tax evasion and bank fraud. That's key because the Trump campaign and Trump camp is basically saying all of that shows that has nothing to do with Russian collusion.
It will be really interesting to see if the president, as we've heard, no indictments, if this report goes light on the president after he's undermined it and called it a witch hunt. How does the White House then talk about it? Yamiche Alcindor, Lisa Desjardins, Robert Costa, and Carrie Johnson. We thank you all.